Cisco Certified Network Associate, Day 15. Welcome back everybody, I'm Imran Rafai, your trainer for this entire series. Before we go any further in this series, I would firstly like to thank all my viewers who has made networking a very reliable brand for going to learn about Cisco. And if you have gone to our website, you'll see that Cisco and CCNA is not the only thing. We have a lot of things planned. We have many vendors, many beautiful programs that we are planning to produce in the very near future. So again, thank you very much. I really appreciate all the support that is pouring in for networking. Please show us your love. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Please like our page on Facebook, and of course you know our website, that is www.nwking.org. You can always visit us there to know more about us. And if you have any questions, you can write into me, that is imran.rafai, imran.rafai @nwking.org. So without wasting much time, let's get into today's class. Today we would be dealing with two very important topics, that is slow connections and switchport security. So since you guys are doing CCNA, I'm assuming most of you are starting in your networking careers. As a network engineer, one of the most important jobs or most important issues that you get would be of slow connections. Now, if you're working with an organization, you would have calls coming in, day out, saying, Imran or whoever you are, they would call and say, we have a very slow connection. The internet is slow, our file server access is slow, our VoIP phone calls are slow. So this is a very common issue that happens in a regular network. Now, sometimes it's very genuine. They're trying to access the internet and your internet connection, right? Maybe if it's not a lease line that you have, if it's just a regular broadband. Of course, broadbands always have variation in speed. So maybe this is one of those days with heavy traffic. You have a very slow connection. So somebody's trying to access one of their websites, and the website is really slow, and they call up and they say, Imran, you've set up the internet wrong, or you set up the network wrong. The network is terribly slow, it doesn't work. Now, a few things as a network engineer you can do. You can look at various aspects. Now we've looked at how to troubleshoot using our OSI models. We know where things can go wrong. So if you use, I'm not saying OSI model per se, but in troubleshooting, if you have a sequence, if you know how you break down a problem, you look at certain aspects that could be wrong, you identify the problems and try to solve it, you understand that it could be a problem. Now, for instance, if somebody calls in and says that internet is slow, now you could go into the website that they're trying. You go in, you go from your computer, you go into that website and see if the website per se is slow. Sometimes big websites, right? Big brands, social media sites, they are generally slow. Sometimes they have a server issue, their website is slow. So you can go there and see if that's happening to you as well. Now, if it's happening to you and to your client or your colleague, then it's something not pertaining to that person's computer, right? So it's something that's happening. The next thing you could see is if all the websites are slow. Now, if all the websites are slow, you know that it's not pertaining to that particular website. It could be an issue with your internet connection, right? So gradually you try to break down this problem into processes, and then you try to identify where the problem is. Now, most of the time, problems or the reasons for having slow connection is these two critical aspects. That is the speed and the duplex of the switch ports, right? So now almost all the switches that you have in today's world are either 100 Mbps or you have the 1 gigabit Ethernet, right? So you have the fast Ethernet or the gigabit Ethernet internets. Now, a gigabit Ethernet device can of course work at 10 Mbps, 100 Mbps or 1000 Mbps, right? So they have different speeds that they can work on. Now you have a lot of devices today would not be able to support gigabit, right? Most of, I think, computers that was manufactured about 5 years ago or 4 years ago, they still could, I think, only use 100 Mbps, right? So a fast Ethernet is what they can do, right? And there are a lot of devices even used in today's world where they cannot do full duplex. Now what is duplex? Duplex is, if a half duplex is when a device can only talk, that is transmit, or receive. It can't do transmit and receive, right? So full duplex is when a device can do both at the same time, right? So if you have set your computer to do half duplex, that means it's only sending or receiving, and the switch port to which this computer is connected, if that is in full duplex, the switch does not know. So switch thinks, okay, it's in full duplex, that means it can send data and receive data at the same time. Whereas when the computer is sending data, the switch is already sending a reply back. Now that's not going to work because the computer is configured for half duplex. So typically, in an ideal situation, both of them should be set to the same thing. So if it's doing full duplex, both the sides, both the device, the switch port and the device that's connected to that switch port should both be doing full duplex or half duplex, whatever it is, and the correct speed. So if it's both working at 100 Mbps, then that's going to be fine. But one device can't talk at 100 Mbps and the other talking or transmitting at 10 Mbps. Now that's a recipe for failure. So that's something you need to be very, very careful. Now, most of the time, by default, these configurations are configured for auto, right? So it says speed auto, duplex auto. Now that's the default configuration for a switch. Now that's also default configuration for almost all the LAN cards that's on your computer. Now the problem is on 100 Mbps or the fast Ethernet switch ports, it is a problem because when they're negotiating, most of the time they do it right, but sometimes they get it wrong, right? They don't get the negotiation right. So if they don't get the negotiation right, they tend to choose different things. Sometimes you would have a device that chooses full duplex and the other device chooses half duplex. That's a problem. Gigabit Ethernet, on the other hand, works perfectly fine. Now there is a reason for that. When fast Ethernet was invented many years ago, the devices that were in use, or majority of devices that were in use those days, were half duplex. So by default, if there is no negotiation happening on a fast Ethernet switch, which is set for speed auto and a duplex auto, is to have the speed at 100 Mbps, but the duplex is set to be on half duplex. Now, let's say you go to one side of the device and you set it to do full duplex. You say, okay, I'm going to do this. I want them to do 100 Mbps full duplex. Now that's your system-wide policy, and you're doing that to all the switches on your switch port. Full duplex, 100 Mbps. Now you have a device that's set for auto, and if you connect that to that port, the other side is not auto, so there's no negotiation that happens. So what happens? By default, this device will go to 100 Mbps speed with a half duplex. Now, if you have that, you're going to have a lot of trouble, right? But if both of them can do gigabit Ethernet, right, and if they have auto set on either sides, then they both are, by default, gigabit Ethernet standards have, by default, they would all go to full duplex and speeds of 1 gigabit. That is 1000 Mbps, right? So that's that. Now, when somebody calls you for this problem, they say my computer is slow. In Cisco, we have a lot of commands. I think we have went through a few commands. One of the best commands that you could use to look at switch port statistics is this command: show interface and give the interface name. Right? So when you give that interface, there are few things that comes up, and the few things that we actually can make use of, right? So let's say if it says fast Ethernet is up, right? When it says it's up, that means physically that device or that port is really working. The next says line protocol is up, right? So when you say line protocol is up, it means the connection is fine and communication is happening through that port, right? The next thing to look at is this full duplex. So it says that this port is working in full duplex and the speed is 100 Mbps. Now, if you see half duplex in today's world, if you see half duplex, that is a sign that something is wrong. So you need to immediately go and look what's happening on the other side. Is the device connected to that port? That's F0/1 in this case. Is that device also communicating half duplex? Now, if it is not, that's your problem. That's the reason the internet or the device communication is very, very slow. What happens is, if you have half duplex mismatch on a port, there is going to be a lot of collision, right? So device is going to send data. The other, if the device is set for half duplex, it can only, like we discussed, it can only send or receive data. But the switch does not know that. The switch is configured for full duplex. The switch will send, when it receives data, it will also send data, and that is a case where you have collisions. So data collides and then it gets lost. Now, of course, TCP, as we learned in our previous videos, TCP has mechanisms to look at sequence numbers and other things which actually can retransmit those lost data. Now, when collision happens, retransmitting of that data, obviously it's going to be slow, because you're doing, instead of the data going through one flow, it's actually breaking, and the device has to retransmit those data over and over again until all the data reaches the other end, right? So that definitely will make things slow. Another thing is, this is another good parameter to look at: 5 minutes input rate and output rate, right? That means on that port, how much data is coming in and how much data is going out. And if it's a switch if it's a switch port, or that device where the switch port is connected to, if it's a device that's actually been working around, you need to see some data here. If you're seeing 0, 0, you know something is really wrong, right? So this is the data for the last 5 minutes. So the last 5 minutes, if that you don't see any data traffic on that port, something is wrong, right? And you can also look at other information, right? You can see broadcast received. You can look at collisions. So if you see collision, that's a classic case where you have a duplex mismatch. You should not, in a switch, like we discussed in one of our previous videos, switch ports by themselves have its own collision domain. That means if you're on a 48 port switch, you have 48 collision domains. That means you will never ever see collisions happening on switches. If you're seeing collision happening on switches, there's definitely something wrong. Another thing is late collision. Now, these are again some things that you need to look at. If you have late collision or collision, that's really something wrong, right? Now, how do we set these things? So let me just go to packet tracer. Okay, I've just opened a switch. So I say n config terminal. Okay, I'm going to type these commands now, because I had somebody complain that I'm typing shortcuts. So I'm going to type full command from today. So this is also going to be a practice session. And another thing is, if you're watching this video, I would suggest you take a paper and start writing these commands, because I believe it's one thing to type it on the keyboard, right? But when you're learning, it's always a good thing to write down the commands, because if you start writing those commands, you're doing it without the help of the tab key, which is on the computer. So you tend to remember those commands a little bit better than making use of the tab key, right? So when you say configure terminal, you go into the global configuration mode, and I'm going to go into the interface fast Ethernet 0/1, right? Now, if I want to set the speed, I say speed, and I can put different speeds, right? So this in packet tracer, this is a fast Ethernet. It's not a gigabit Ethernet switch. It's a 100 Mbps switch. So I can do speeds of 100 or 10. I'm going to say speed is 100. Now it's working at 100 Mbps. And whenever you manually hard code the speed, you need to change duplex as well. So you can't just say duplex auto, but speed is set to a certain limit. That cannot happen. You need to set both together. And another precaution: do not, I repeat, do not do this on a production environment. Now, what happens when you do this? The switch port will have to go down and come back up. Now, it just may be for 5 seconds, but in a production environment, 5 second also can be really critical. So unless you have authorization to do this, or unless it's not a production environment, or maybe production environment but after work hours, that's when you should be even trying to do this, right? So yeah, so how do you hardcode duplex? You say duplex, and then again you can do auto, full or half. So I'm going to hardcode this to full, right? So now this port, so you can look into this, show interface F0/1. You can see that it is in full duplex and 100 Mbps. Now also let me look at the running configuration, right? So I say show run, right? And I see in fast Ethernet 0/1, we're only worried about this. I have manually, so if you look at other switch ports, so you see switch port into fast Ethernet 0/2, there's nothing under that, because whatever is there is all default, right? You will have no shutdown because it's default. And that's another thing. You will see commands here only when it's not the default thing. So if I go back here, let's say I say configure terminal and interface fast Ethernet 0/1, I say shut down, right? Now show run. You will see shutdown is a command here. Okay, that means we have typed that. So if I don't see in a switch, if I don't see shutdown, that means it's that port is not in shutdown mode. Again, I can go interface F0/1. I can say speed auto, duplex auto, right? I'm typing these commands, speed auto and duplex auto, but will it show on the running config? Absolutely not. Those commands are there, but because that's default, speed auto and duplex auto is a default command, that will not get shown in your running configuration, right? So that's how you configure speed and duplex auto. Now the question, this is your question. In your production environment, do you think it's a good idea to go and hard code all the speeds and duplexes? Well, the answer is it depends. Right. The reason it depends is ideally it's a good thing to go and configure all speed and duplex, but then it's a lot of work. You can't manually go into each switch port and configure that to a certain speed and do full duplex, and then go to all the devices that's connected and do the same thing. So as a thumb rule, it's best to hard code your speed and duplexes on critical devices. Now what are critical devices? Your servers, your routers, the ports where servers and routers and maybe your surveillance systems, your voice phones, these voice servers, right? So where these are connected, those ports best to keep in hard-coded mode. So you say 1 Gbps or 1000 Mbps, and you do full duplex. Do that on all the sides. So you do it on the server as well. Server is talking at that speed. The port where the server is connected, that's also talking at that speed. So critical devices, hard-coded. That will save you a ton of time, right? So that's about speed and duplexes, right? So if we go back here, so that's how you solve if you have slow connection problems. One of the critical aspects to look into is speed and duplex, right? Next, we look at port security. Now, before we do port security, we need to understand what is port security. And now think about this. You're in your office environment, right? And you have wall sockets. Now, wall sockets are available throughout the office, right? Now, your computers are connected to those ports, correct? So everybody's computers are connected. Mostly, if it's desktops, your desktops are connected to those ports, right? Now, tell me this: what is preventing me? Now, assume I'm a hacker. What is preventing me from removing that wall connection and putting my computer onto that wall, right? Nothing. Nothing is preventing. I can remove that cable, plug that into my laptop. Now my laptop, being my laptop, and mostly all the home users, right? Laptops are generally infested with viruses, right? If it's a student, now you know how students are. Most of them are most of the time on torrent websites, downloading music and movies. Now, unknowingly, these people are infecting their computer, right? So you have viruses on the computers, you have malwares that's running. The minute you plug it into the computer on your office network, you have compromised your office network, right? There are viruses that can spread across the network. Now, this is not an ideal situation. You don't want this to happen. Also, if you're a hacker, that's a classic way you could do a man-in-the-middle attack, where you actually plug in a device, or maybe plug in a computer to that port and spoof MAC address, right? You spoof MAC address and make sure that everybody is sending data to the gateway, assuming all the devices are thinking that it's sending internet traffic to the gateway, but the hacker has spoofed MAC address such that all the traffic is coming to the hacker's computer, and the hacker has configured his device to go out to the internet. So basically all the internet connection is, instead of going through the gateway, through your normal office gateway, it's going through your hacker's computer, and a hacker can literally sit there, run Wireshark or any packet analysis software and capture data. Your passwords can be compromised. So there are a lot of things, security vulnerabilities or security issues that are there. So as a first line of defense, what you could do is port security. Now, if you ask me, is port security the best security you can use? Absolutely not. Port security is your first line of defense. Now, security is not a one trick game. Security is multi-levels, multi-layers. You have physical securities, you can have layer 2 security, layer 3 security, layer 7 securities. You have multiple layer securities, right? So security is a lot more than port security, but port security is your first line of defense. So we will look at how to do port security, how you can lock down. Like somebody changes an existing computer, if they remove that and plug a new device, how we can prevent that. We will look into it, right? So let me go back to Packet Tracer. All right. Now I have this PC0 connected to FA0/1, okay? And I'm gonna give an IP address here. So I think I've already given an IP address here. That's the VLAN 1. So show IP interface brief. Now that's another command that I want all of you all to by heart. We need this for troubleshooting, right? Show IP interface brief, and I love this command. It's a beautiful command. It lists all the interfaces on your device. So I have fast Ethernet 0/1. It goes up to 0/24. Then I have a couple of gigabit Ethernet ports, 0/1, 0/2, and then I have a VLAN 1. This is the default VLAN, and I have given a management IP of 10.1.1.1 for this VLAN, right? And I've gone to this device and I have configured them with an IP address 10.1.1.2, and I've given these device thing. Okay. Now, for port security, the first thing is let me go into that port interface FA0/1, because that's the port that's connected to that device. So I want this port to go through. Now I'm enabling port security on this port only, right? So how do I enable port security? First thing you need to remember is port security can only be enabled on access ports. So you already know what trunk port is, and you already know what access port is, right? So the first thing you need to do is put this port into access. So I'm going to say switchport mode access, switchport access VLAN 1, right? By default it's in VLAN 1, but I'm just going to say that. So we have converted this port into access, Now I'm going to say Switchport Security, right? And I have these three options. So whenever you see CR, so when you do this question mark and when you see CR, that means this command, whatever you have typed, that's a valid command. So in this case, when I put Switchport port security and hit enter, that is how you enable port security. That means that's the switch. You click on that, your port security is enabled, right? So at the moment, port security is not enabled. And before we enable port security, let's do some configuration. So we can give MAC address. Now you can say Switchport port security and say MAC address, right? And I can type the MAC address that I want this switch to work. That means this port will only have that MAC address. Now, what's the MAC address? We can go look into this computer. What's the MAC address of this device? ipconfig all, right? ipconfig all, it gives me that there is a fast Ethernet 0. That's the only interface that it has. And the physical address of this device is 0001.6307.EEAE, right? If I'm not mistaken, it's EEAE, right? This is the MAC address. Now, Windows, now this is Packet Tracer. It's a Cisco device. That's why it's in this format. But Microsoft on your Windows device, if you say command prompt or do the same command, ipconfig/all, and let's look at some of the MAC address. So I have this wireless LAN MAC address is in this format. So it is 28E3474140D90, which is exactly the same thing. These are hexadecimal numbers. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hexadecimal number. Microsoft represents it by 2 hexadecimal, then colon, then hyphen, then hex 2 hexa, then hyphen, that format. But Cisco loves to put it in this format, which is 4 hexa dot 4 hexa dot 4 hexa, right? So it doesn't matter. You can just copy this, you group it in 4s, it becomes the same thing, but the numbers will exactly be the same, right? Having said that, let's go back here. So this is the MAC address. Now I need to go here and tell them that this is the only MAC address that is allowed on that switch port. Which is a switch port? It's interface FA0/1, right? That's fast Ethernet 0/1. I'm telling Switchport port security MAC address that's allowed is only this 0001.6307.EEAE, right? So that's one way of inputting. So I can just put that information and it will pick, right? Now, if you don't want to type it, of course, you can look at the MAC addresses that's available, that's at the moment communicating on the switch. So you can do show. So you know what do means. So whenever I type the command do, like we already discussed, it means this is a command that works in the privilege access mode, right? So it's a show command. So do show MAC address. Yeah, and the problem when you do command is your tabs will not work. So you can't do a tab to complete the words. So you have to type it. So do show MAC address table. When I type this, it tells me that at the moment it doesn't know any MAC address. So let me do this. Let me generate some traffic. So show IP interface brief. Let me see if everything is okay. It says administratively down. So I'm gonna take that switch port off administrations configure T interface FA0/1. No shut down, right? Now this should go to green immediately, and once it's off, once it starts going up, so do show IP interface brief again. I can see that it's still down. Why is it in down? Okay, let's generate some traffic from here. So I'm gonna say ping 10.1.1.1. It should go through. Now you can see that it's actually pinging the VLAN interface here, right? So show MAC address table, and you can see that this MAC address is already here in the MAC address table. That means it just learned the MAC address of this device. It says on port FA0/1 there is a MAC address that's communicating, and the MAC address is this. So this is another thing. You can go here and copy this if you don't want to type it, right? Because you're already on the switch, you don't have to go to the computer to see the MAC address. From the switch you can see that the MAC address is binded to this interface. So you can go to that interface and do that command. So you Switchport Security MAC address, and you can copy this and you can paste it here, right? So this is another way. So one, if you know the MAC address, type it in. Two, you can look at the MAC address table, copy it and paste it here. But the best and the easiest is another command called as sticky, right? So what does sticky mean? Assume you are in an office, you're coming to into an office, and then you are given the task of configuring Switchport security. Now, it's a fair guess to guess that the devices that are currently plugged in are the correct devices, are the devices that is supposed to be in those ports. So when you give this command, Switchport security MAC address sticky, it says the next MAC address that comes on that port is the one that is to be configured on that port. That means it's going to make sure that whatever is currently there, or whatever is currently there, and when it starts talking, if it's not already communicating on that port, whenever it communicates, whenever it learns that MAC address, the first MAC address it learns from that port, that would be added. So if you can look at it this way, you can go into show run, and you can see that Switchport security MAC address is sticky, right? Now I've put that command here, right? A few more things that we need to do. Okay, configure terminal interface FA0/1. Okay, so we have done that. So we will see how that learns the MAC address in a while. Next is Switchport security maximum. Now what does maximum mean? Maximum means how many MAC addresses do you want to be learned on that port. Ideal cases you would give it as 1, but then there are cases where you will have your VoIP phones, your IP phones are looped to your computer. So basically your computer is connected to the IP phone, and the IP phone is connected to the switch. Now you will have 2 MAC addresses because the IP phone has a MAC address, your computer has a MAC address. So in that case you can give a maximum of 2. The default value is maximum 1, and that's why it is not shown here. If I change the maximum value to anything else, it will get shown in the running configuration, right? So I'm going to leave it at 1, right? So Switchport security is maximum 1. Next thing is violation, right? So what is violation? Violation is to tell if that, let's say if you're configured a MAC address, and if that port sees a new MAC address, if it sees a new MAC address that is not what you have configured, then a violation has occurred, right? So what do you want it to do if a violation has occurred? Do you want it to, so let's see what are the options you have. Do you want it to shut down? Shut down is the default violation method. That means if you find a violation, it says shut that port down, put that port in an error disabled state. If it's an error disabled state, that means the minute somebody plugs in a new device there, that port is shut down. The only way that port can come back on is the administrator resetting that port. So even if you put back the original computer back on that port, it's not going to work. That port is going to stay shut, right? Other 2 violation methods that you can use is protect and restrict. Now, when you enable protect or restrict, both of them will immediately stop traffic. So let's say you're on protect, you have one computer that is the correct MAC address, you change it with a new device with the wrong MAC address, immediately that traffic is stopped, right? Traffic is prevented from going, it will not let that computer communicate. Now you plug the original computer back in, it will start letting through. Absolutely fine. Nothing happened. Now that's protect. Restrict is the same thing. It stops traffic on the port if a wrong MAC address is plugged in, but as soon as you put the right MAC address, it starts sending it exactly like protect. The only difference in restrict is that it sends an SNMP log message. It actually registers the violation. So every time the violation happens, it says, okay, violation happened twice, violation happened 3 times, violation happened 4 times. It keeps a track of the violations. So that's the difference between protect and restrict. One keeps a log, one does not keep a log, right? Okay, so we're going to keep it at shutdown. Shutdown is default. I don't need to type it, but I'm going to just still type it. Now we have done whatever required configuration. Now I am going to enable port security. So how do you do that? It is Switchport port security and hit enter, which means I have just enabled Switchport port security, right? So I'm going to send some traffic and I'm going to get it to learn the MAC address. Now if I say show run, do you see this? It added this into the running configuration. It said Switchport port security MAC address, and the MAC address that can work is this. I didn't have to type it. So if you have, let's say it's a huge organization, you have 100 switches or maybe even 10 switches, right? If it's a 48 port switch, that's 480 different devices. It's very easy to put the sticky command there and take all the MAC address instead of having to manually configure those devices, right? So it immediately looks at the MAC address that's coming in and puts that on there. So now you're on this device is the only device that can communicate. So let's do this. Let's do a violation. I'm going to remove this. I'm going to plug a new computer, right? And I'm going to give exactly the same IP address. The person who is doing this is not very well versed with technology, so he's thinking maybe if he puts the same same IP address, he should be able to go through. So let's do the same MAC address and try to do a ping. So I'm going to say 10.1.1.1 and let's see what happened. You can see here, right? Link change interface went down. That's fine. I've disconnected the cable. So this 3 happened when I disconnected the cable. I plugged a new computer in. So this link came up, right? And all the other link protocol, line protocols also came up. Immediately it realized that the MAC address is coming wrong. It's not the configured MAC address. It immediately changed the state to administratively down. Now this is a problem with Packet Tracer. It actually does not go to administratively down. It goes into an error disabled state. So on a real device, it will tell it's gone down to an error disabled state, and the line protocol obviously will go down. Now in this situation, the ping will not go through. So I'm going to ping again. The ping is not going to go through because this device has gone through. So if somebody calls that and says that your internet is not working, that device cannot get into the network or communicate, and you don't know about Switchport security, so you go to show IP interface brief. This is like one of my favorite commands, like I've said many times. And I look in here, fast Ethernet, I see that status is down and protocol is down, and I see it's not administratively down, which means I've not put that command shut down, right? This means that everything is okay. I have not manually configured it to go into shutdown, right? So I see this and I am seeing nothing's wrong. So why is that communication not happening? You can look into another command, show interface F0/1. So you're looking into that interface and you see what's happened. So this is your first thing. So you see here fast Ethernet is down, okay, line protocol is down, and then it says why it is down. It says it's error disabled. The minute you see error disabled, you need to know Switchport port security is on. How do you look into that? Show port security. I hit enter. It will tell that F0/1 port is enabled for port security. Maximum secure address we are configured as 1. Current address is already 1. We already have 1 configured by sticky. And it says current violation. There's 1 violation that's happened. And whenever violation happens, what's a violation that we have, a violation action that we have configured? In this case, it is shutdown, right? So we know that this device is in violation mode. Now there's another command, right? I would love if you could just write down these commands, because these are critical. So every time we do videos, I would appreciate if you would write down those commands. You can say day 15, the topic that we're discussing, and write down the commands, because see, at the end of the day, CCNA is a very, very basic. I mean, CCNA is basically fundamentals, right? It's not rocket science. It's not a very difficult exam to pass, but the most critical thing is to know Cisco commands. You should be a master of Cisco commands and troubleshooting and configuration. And you can do that only if you know the commands by heart. To do that, you have to practice, and to practice, you need to know that. Of course, you can watch my videos over and over again. It's on YouTube. It's free. You can just run it, play it back to back, and you just replay it as many times as you want. And that's another thing. But it's best if you write down, because you can always refer to it. Okay. Next command is show port security address. You can see the MAC address that's configured for fast Ethernet 0/1 is this, and it is configured through sticky, right? And you can also look at interface FA0/1, right? If you do this command, this tells you everything. It says port security is enabled, secure shutdown, violation mode. This is secure shutdown. It's saying the status at the moment is in secure shutdown. So when you look at this, you can tell, okay, now this person tried to change the MAC address. He plugged in another device, and this port has already gone into secure shutdown. Now he must have put back the original computer there, right? So you look at this MAC address, it must be the same MAC address that his current connected computer is, but this person tried putting another device there, and that is why this port has gone into a secure shutdown, right? So you can see that violation mode is shut down. Aging time. Now if you want these MAC address to expire, right, whatever MAC address they're configuring, you want it to expire after a certain time, you can give aging time, right? We have not given that. Maximum MAC address, we have configured it to be 1. Total MAC address is 1. Configured MAC address is 0. We do not configure it. If you're manually typing it, it will come in here, but we are using sticky, so you'll have sticky MAC address, which is 1. Last source MAC address that we have seen is this. This is the MAC address that came in to do the violation. Because of this is not matching with the configured MAC address, and that's the reason it got violation. And it says security violation count is 1. As soon as this violation happened, it shut down the port, right? So if you want this to start working, so we go back and let's put the original computer back on. Okay, I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to put this computer back on, and I'm going to so yeah, now this computer has come back on, and again I'm trying to ping, it will not work. You'll see that these are still in zeros, red mode. That means it is not going to work. No matter you put the original computer back, it is not going to work. The only way you can get it to work is go into that interface, right, and to shut down, put that device, put that port down, administratively down, and do no shutdown, which means you're shutting it down and getting it back, which will reset the port security, and it should start working. So if you go now, show port security interface FA0/1, you will see that this port has gone to stay secure up. Now everything should work normally. So if you go here and you start pinging, it will start working. Okay, it's still not working, but it should work. It should work. Why is it not working? Yeah. There are too many apps. Right, so you can see it is working absolutely fine. So that is port security for you. Now again, question, is it very, very strong? Absolutely not. It's not a very strong level of security. So if you're thinking security in terms of security, I'm sorry, this is not security. It's just one way of securing your premise. It's a physical security, more of physical security than doing a logical security. But there are many softwares that you can spoof MAC addresses. So if you know the MAC address of this device, of your desktop computer, and port security is enabled on your office network, and you want this device, you won't use your personal laptop in the network, you can just go copy that MAC address, use some MAC address spoofing softwares, spoof that MAC address, tell this device to tell the switch that you are coming from a certain MAC address, which is what you've cloned from your desktop computer, and everything will work. Your switch will not even know there has been a violation. So it's not a very secure way, but it is going to prevent a lot of people getting onto the device unauthorized, right? So I think that is all the information that I think I wanted to share in this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to write into me. You can comment on YouTube, you can comment on Facebook, you can write into me, and and when I have time, or one of my team members will reply to you. And so I hope this has been very informative. We'll be continuing this series, and I'm hoping to finish this series. We'll have up to maybe 50 or 60 videos, and I think with today's video we have finished the basics of switching. So we will maybe not, if not from the next video, the video after that, we will start routing, and we will come back to switching, a little more advanced topics of switching a little later, maybe 25 or 30 video, 25 video 30. We'll come back to switching and to go into a little more advanced topics of switching. But for the moment, we have covered the basics of switching, which is required for us, and we will be starting routing. And routing, trust me, is going to be very, very, very interesting. So stay tuned. We are going to come back with a lot more videos, and we will definitely finish this series. We will start many, many new series which you're going to love. So thank you so much for all the support. Don't forget to click on the bottom right hand corner and subscribe to YouTube. And of course, don't forget to go into Facebook and like our page there. Thank you so much, one and all, and have a great evening. Bye-bye.